Hi, everybody. It's a Sunday morning. Hope you had a nice weekend so far. You got your coffee all set to go. Mine's about three-quarters through here. And we're all just kind of sitting around, I guess, waiting for the howling winds to start. And they're going to start soon enough. A lot of strong winds already being reported in and around the Great Lakes. Oftentimes, when I look at situations like this, you see the tide pressure gradient, you see what how the maps look, and you start to occasionally wonder, well, is it really going to be that windy? And then you look at what some of the obs are doing this morning in and around the Great Lakes, which is where the storm is. You think, yeah, there probably will be some pretty hefty gusts. This is one big powerhouse system that is headed up through the Great Lakes. And actually, when you look at the calendar, we're at the almost the end of February here, and you start to get these occasional intense storms if they run across the Great Lakes or toward the Great Lakes. They've all been cutting this year, so why should this one have been any different? You do get that march in like a lion type setup, and the loops that I'm going to show you, a couple of them, you really ought to take a look at these from time to time, if not every day. They are rather useful. These are the water vapor imagery loops, and looking at the low levels of the atmosphere first. We'll just bring them up one level at a time. But you can see the whole atmosphere really at work here, just in terms of the moisture. Now here comes the dry slot. You got this dry air that is shooting up from the southwest, and that is moving into western Pennsylvania, and the moisture that's over the east, of course. So we had rain overnight and this morning, waiting for that to get out of the way. And then if you look around the Great Lakes, you've got the spinning cloud structure of the actual intense low center that is pretty much sitting squarely in the middle of the Great Lakes region. And you've got moisture that's coming into the west with the next round, as they got all kinds of winter storm watches and warnings there. So that's how it looks at the low levels. And I'll switch off to we'll go to the upper levels at this point. This is, by the way, if you go to, this is from the Nestis, all the new satellites from GOES 16 and GOES 17. But here, at least, we could pick out pretty much how the whole upper atmosphere is functioning, and how all of this is driven from the standpoint of the upper air. And look at that area over Cuba and the Dominican Republic and the Bahamas. There's your upper ridge that's just sitting off the East Coast. And now you've got all that energy and the jet that is coming in from the Pacific and impacting the system that is lifting up toward the Great Lakes. So it all just kind of makes sense when you look at the maps. We look at these models and what the models are doing. It's a good idea to match them up by taking a look at what is actually happening. A lot of the big problem these days, I think, with a lot of forecasters are that they forget to look at what's actually going on. So this morning, uh, this is we're at 10:03 Eastern time. The northern half of the United States is getting impact, and the eastern half of the U.S. is getting impact from the northern half from the overall pattern in terms of precip, the eastern half in terms of precip, and also in terms of wind, because we've got a lot of wind advisories and high wind warnings up covering from the Great Lakes all the way through the Northeast. And with respect to precip, we still have blizzard warnings up for northern Wisconsin, the upper peninsula of Michigan, the northwestern part of the lower peninsula of Michigan, and then those blizzard warnings extend back through Minnesota and through much of Iowa. Now, remember, we are dealing with here now not so much how much snow is falling, but actually more along the lines of the restricted visibilities. We're getting 50 to 60-mile-an-hour winds, even if there's the accumulating snow is done. All that snow is getting blown around in a big way, and you're looking at a lot of places where visibilities are down close to zero just from blowing snow. So that creates blizzard conditions. So always remember, it's not about how hard it's snowing; it's about visibility. And you also can see the winter storm warnings that are up throughout much of Montana now, northwestern Wyoming, back through Idaho, and into Oregon. A lot of winter storm watches are up as well, even to coastal areas of Oregon, as you've got, still there's troughing off in the west, and that is going to have impact, and there's still plenty of cold air around as well. So the impact there is big. Take a look at the winds as of 10 this morning. I plotted the wind barbs and the peak wind gusts. You can do this yourself if you go to the NWS electronic digital display, or EDD. So if you just go to, you could link off of it pretty much from any NOAA website, weather.gov, and go to your local office. But if you can't find the link on there, it's usually uh, under the box, the icon box that says current weather. And then you can just pretty much construct this yourself. And there are all sorts of different parameters that you can pick from. But some of these wind gusts in and around the Great Lakes, we're looking at gusts to a lot of gusts into the 50s. And I did notice an hour ago there were some low 60s gusts in northern Illinois, but some of the newer obs, the peak winds, are a little bit lower. But these peak gusts are all every bit of 50 miles an hour or more, all through the Great Lakes, and then going northward through Wisconsin. You start to see the gusts, they diminish a little bit as you go further to the west, but you're still every bit of sustained 20 to 30, 25 to 30 miles an hour. Take a look at some of these wind barbs. Now we're getting to some big gusts again as we go back further to the west, 53, 39, 40, 51. But the sustained winds are all pretty solid at 20 to 30, 35 miles an hour sustained. And in terms of the change that's going to be happening in the eastern part of the U.S., first wind shift is going to be to the southwest. And that's going to occur as we go into this afternoon. We already have southwest winds blowing throughout much of western Pennsylvania, and we're getting some gusts there even over 50 miles an hour in and around Pittsburgh. The sustained winds are all 20 to 30. Well ahead of it, there's not a whole lot of wind now, but there will be shortly as we start to swing the weather fronts to the east, and this low begins to push away to the northeast. Look at that sustained wind. We've got a 50-knot sustained wind barb out in it's called Lorraine Harbor in western Lake Erie, sustained at 50, gusting to 58. There are going to be some gusts up in the lakes of 60 to 70 miles an hour in Lake Erie and Lake Ontario out of this. The wind machine has not kicked in to across the shores of Lake Ontario yet. The South Shore areas are seeing some 20 to 30 knot winds. And then you look up on the eastern shores, some peak gusts here of 40 to 50 miles an hour already showing up. But this looks like it might be more localized than anything else, because if you look at everybody around at the moment, the winds are not quite as strong. So, but no matter, this is all going to get rocked pretty strongly. They have storm warnings up for the Great Lakes that you don't see for Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, and they're talking about some pretty interesting wave action happening as well on the order of 15, 20 feet or higher. So this is going to really be quite the event for Lake Erie and Lake Ontario and the surrounding areas to the east and to the south shores of both locations. There will also be some lake effect action here as far as snow is concerned, and that will kick in later on for tonight and tomorrow. Here's the visible satellite loop this morning. And the clouds, of course, in the east. You've got the occluded front that's sort of swinging around. The rotation that's back up through the Great Lakes. We saw that much better with the water vapor imagery, but you can see it coming in when it goes to past sunrise here. You see the distinct rotation on the cloud in terms of how it's structured there on the satellite. So just crazy stuff with this system. Here's your radar as of 10:10 Eastern Time AM. So if you're watching this later on a replay, just remember that this is from earlier. So you can check out you can check out the latest stuff on weather.gov and just go to your local office and pull up the radar. But here's the main area of rain overnight. It looks like about half an inch to an inch in a lot of places, plus or minus. And there's one more band of showers out now in central Pennsylvania. So that is with the front that is swinging through. And over in the Great Lakes, you see the snows that are being produced around the upper low that is driving eastward. But it's patchy. There's not a widespread snow area here like there was last night. So again, a lot of the blizzard warnings that are being driven here is more because of the blowing snow rather than the actual snow falling. Though if you look at the obs where you're seeing these bands here, this is where you're probably still seeing some moderate to heavy snow actually falling. Down to the south, we've got this trailing front, of course, and that is producing some showers and some probably a couple of thunderstorms will pop up later on today, but there's no real risk of severe weather. And then we go out to the west, and here's that next energy that's coming in to the northwest with the snows, and this is all being played out in the winter storm watches and warnings that we're seeing for that particular area. And of course, that energy eventually winds up coming to the east anyway. So here's the the upper view. We're looking at the 500 millibar map here, roughly 18,000 feet or so, and starting with the NAM model. This is for uh, 10 p.m. tonight. And of course, you see that. I'll back it up a little bit. So here's how it all came about. Big ridge in the east, that deep trough in the west, that shot of energy that dropped down into the southwest. This was the Flagstaff snowstorm and the Arizona snowstorm lifting up to the northeast, and that nice tight wrapped up little upper low, and of course if you take a look north and west of it, there's a short wave trough that is swinging down and around, just kind of acting as the phasing mechanism here as it lifts up towards the Great Lakes and strengthens, and then gradually transfers its way, transfers that energy is going to wind up redeveloping in over New Brunswick and moving to the east. And there's your upper low at that as we get into Monday afternoon. And of course, this is all going to be translated at the surface with a very tight pressure gradient. Now, that's going to pull out. You've got energy. It's hard to see. You're dealing with weak pieces that are coming out from the west. The trough that is off the west coast, that stuff that's coming in now and in through tomorrow, some of that's going to get shot eastward. It's hard to really see it um, in the overall pattern because of the fact that it really is very flat. It's got this, west to east sort of gentle look to it as you move across the nation. There's not much definition to these systems, so that should keep them on the weak side. And honestly, I mean, with respect to development, it's hard to see how anything is going to come out any differently from what we've had overall. We're in this period now. We're going to have this general relaxation of the upper air, the primary pattern, the primary upper air pattern. So for the next 10 days or so, you'll probably see some weak systems that if things were to set up could give you one last gasp snow event. I just don't know whether you're going to have that happen. Here's the NAM look as we go into Monday and Tuesday. Now, of course, the big deal is going to be the pressure gradient, extremely tight here. Lots of isobars, lines of equal pressure. Large change in pressure over a relatively short distance, and that defines how strong the winds are going to be. In this particular case, the gradient is extremely tight through the northern Great Lakes. There's your high north of Montana, 1038 millibars, 972 low. So that's a 28, 38, 56 millibar difference in a distance. So if you've got the low is roughly, let's say it's at 80 west, just for math's sake, and this is at 105. So 25 degrees times 16 nautical miles. So you're talking about 50, a 55 millibar pressure change over about 1,400 miles. That is, that's pretty tight. Okay, and actually the tightest of the gradient runs, from western Minnesota on eastward. So you could even shorten the distance a bit further if you like. But it's the play between the high and the low here, and of course that gradient is also extremely tight for overnight and on Monday in the eastern part of the United States. A lot of isobars there, deep lows. One low sitting southeast of James Bay, the other, as we said, that redeveloping low in New Brunswick that takes over and becomes the main storm center. And of course, now as we move into Monday night and Tuesday, you finally see the gradient relax. You also see, by the way, two areas of interest. The one that's up in the northern plains that is moving eastward, and then you've got this energy and some precip that's down in the Gulf states. So you have two separate systems here, and shortwave troughs that go with it. And going into Wednesday evening, you have an area of snow that moves across the Great Lakes and into western New York. And at the same time, you've got low pressure that is showing up off the southeast coast of the United States. The problem here is when you look at the upper air, and by the way, also not to leave this out, you've got the second system that comes into Wyoming, and that's something for probably for Friday into Friday night in terms of timing. But we'll take first things first. But again, look at the upper air. It's very, very flat, and we'll carry it over to the long range on the GFS as well. So we can go a bit further into time from last night. Again, very, very flat. It's hard to really find these systems in the east. You're basically still in a ridge position in the eastern part of the United States. It's not a strong one. It's a flat ridge, but that really explains the signature of the overall pattern across the U.S. It's just very flat, and the GFS wants to swing another deep trough into the plains. Big ridge pops up off along and just off the East Coast this time around, but it still winds up the same thing. It's trying to rhyme again with what's happening now, with another system coming into the Northwest, swings across the Great Lakes, and then finds its way, swings across the Central Plains, finds its way toward the east, maybe the Eastern Lakes this time around, with some phasing, and the GFS at least wants to make another big storm out of this, and this would be for next weekend. So perhaps we may be in the same place next weekend. The overnight European run, similar idea, okay, just so we're clear, similar idea, although the European, at least for the system for Thursday, wants to bring it a little further south and actually produces a coating to an inch or two of snow for northeastern Pennsylvania to northern New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, and southern New England, and the lower Hudson Valley. That would be it. Okay, if you wind up with a little more amplitude, that may very well be the case. But the one that follows, it's the same idea here. So I think it would argue that we could have another pretty strong storm heading up toward the Great Lakes. This is where they've been going, folks. It's hard to, you can't fight the rhyming nature of the pattern when time after time, it's what did the old line about the definition of insanity? When you do something over and over again, expecting that you're going to have some kind of different outcome, and it doesn't happen. Banging your head against the table, trying to get rid of a headache, it just produces an even bigger headache. Here's the European in 24-hour increments. Of course, your weak system that you could you could you could pick it out to some degree here for Thursday night into Friday. Then it's got low pressure in North Texas. There's a weak low that's east of the Carolinas. That's going to go out. Been the signature all winter long with these systems off the southeast that have just not been able to move up the East Coast and just move out to the east. Here's your low for Saturday, and it has a 989-ish pressure. So the pressure here is not as deep, but still has a pretty strong system. It's going to mean for another snowstorm for the Western Lakes for sure, and then that moves up and out, and you've got sprawling high pressure that comes in for the rest of the period, and you'll be cold and dry. And now we're up to March 6th, okay? And here is talking about beating heads against the table, okay, with regards to the long range pattern, the sort of constant change that it's coming, and I see a better pattern ahead, on and on and on. And of course, we've been looking at the teleconnections. Okay, now I just have the new ones up here. They just updated them. So let me take a look at this, okay, and look at what has evolved in the overall look of the teleconnections. Remember, the teleconnections were forecast on the Pacific North America Index to go positive. Remember? Okay. And look where the new teleconnection forecast based on the models is taking you. All negative all the way through. The EPO is negative at least, but that starts to run up toward the neutral line around the first few days of March next weekend. So, that is the signal perhaps for the next storm system going into the Western Great Lakes when you have this big run up from off the wall negative, which is where it's going to be for much of this week, up to the neutral line. And the NAO, which has been totally useless in every way you can imagine, goes actually strongly positive later next week and stays positive right through the first dozen days of March. But it's that PNA. What this means is, if you really look at what this all means, and overall, is that the primary pattern, okay, the overall pattern, and the Pacific jet is so dominant in terms of its influence. And you still have people coming around saying that it's going to, it doesn't matter, it doesn't, and it does. You have this mess across the Pacific. By the end of the forecast period, you still have, there's a peak of a ridge here in the west for on the European model, but you wonder, okay, you look at the GFS from last night, there's a trough there, okay? There's a trough there in the west that pulls out, and guess what? It's coming right back. This is a horrible looking upper air from the standpoint of the Pacific. The fire hose is a little further north, but it's still a fire hose that runs pretty much all the way across the Pacific, from southwest of the Aleutians all the way into the west coast. This is a horrible looking pattern from this if you're trying to argue that there's going to be one last gasp attempt. It's hard to do it off of this upper air. And on the Atlantic side, the same problem. We are talking about this is in the longer range, but when you have a jet that pretty much takes you straight from Charleston to Lisbon, as you do here, there's nothing out there. If you look at the surface on the Atlantic side, okay, there's nothing here, okay, nothing. There's nothing in terms of storms that are far enough south that would take these lows, this energy that keeps coming off the southeast coast of the United States. Look at this low for later this week. It goes straight out east. Okay, you can't do it here, folks. And if the primary pattern is lifting storms up towards the Great Lakes, and there's the next one for next weekend, which, by the way, the GFS has a much deeper low than the European. The European's been slow to coming around to this idea of another major storm going into the Great Lakes. And I mentioned a few days ago on my live stream that I wasn't quite believing the GFS on it, but it's hard to argue against this, that you're going to wind up with another major storm going into the Great Lakes next weekend, and then another round of tight pressure gradients and strong winds. Another setup, deep high, strong high in the plains, intense low over the lakes. How hard to fight this? But again, when you look at the surface in terms of the Atlantic, the whole Atlantic is dominated by one big storm system. There's the one at the moment. Okay, they're all kind of rotating around Greenland. It's dominated by one storm system that's up in Greenland. Everything else is moving away to the east, and then that pulls out, and the next one comes out right in behind it in this sort of progressive, fashion. So if you don't have a logjam of lows out there in the in the central Atlantic at least, it's going to be really hard to bring storms up the East Coast, even though the model keeps trying to do it in the long range. Make no mistake. Remember, this whole winter we have spent this entire winter with weather models on a daily basis showing snowstorms 7 to 10 days out or longer, and that's it. It never. I think I've seen more snowstorms in the 7 to 10 day outlook and beyond this winter than I've seen in any other winter, and not a single one, not one of those systems has even remotely come close to playing out. You model your life away. Nothing's changed in the last 4 weeks, and I suspect that nothing much is going to be changing going forward. So I think that pretty much wraps it up with regards to everything weather-wise this morning. Stephen Franco, I think the way the polar vortex split up this year just created a bad pattern. Well, Stephen, remember, always remember this. Just because you always look when people to point out and say, okay, this particular event is happening in the atmosphere, and that's going to go automatically take you into a positive pattern. No, it doesn't work that way. Just you have all these events going on, and the it doesn't necessarily take you to a place where your troughs and ridges are going to be in the right spot. Going specifically with that polar vortex split, and I wonder if this matters. I would like to pose this question to Judah Cohen. The split last year came up from the Atlantic. Okay, that came up from the Atlantic, and took the polar vortex apart and led to the storminess and the blocking pattern that we got into for the month of March. But my question is, for the polar vortex split that we saw this year, that came in from the Siberia side, all right? And I wonder whether that makes all the difference in the world, that the fact that the split was orchestrated by a heat pulse that came across Europe and Asia, and came up from the west, basically, as opposed to coming in from our east, made a difference in terms of where the troughing set up. In my mind, when I look at it, but this is above my pay grade, in my mind, I look at it and saying, you know what, maybe that's what the difference here. The pulse that split the vortex happened there and not in the Atlantic. But I could be looking at this, in the wrong way, and that's not my expertise. So we'll have to leave it for those who know those things a bit better. Norma Belshaw, Joyce Mack, nice to see you both on this morning. And of course, we've got all the usual suspects, as we will call them: Scott Briller, David Schwartz, Timothy Veltman, and a few of you that are lurking in the background. William Huber, nice to see you on this morning. Michael Piero, you made it. Good for you. And for those of you who are joining and watching it on the replay, Cynthia Gwynn Yaudis, verifying the howling Midwest winds in southern Indiana, gusting to 50 miles an hour and snowing like crazy. Yeah, you're certainly from some of the obs, I've seen some gusts up to 60, and of course now that's all going to be spreading up across Pennsylvania. There are going to be some of the mountains are going to channel that wind, funneling that wind down in some places. I really would not be shocked to see some crazy wind gusts up in the 60 to 70 mile an hour range in a few places in the Northeast. And they're talking to the folks that know the topography and the climate in upstate New York, in and around the Great Lakes, talking about gusts of 60 or 70 miles an hour. A few folks that I know that are up there said they can't remember the last time, if at all, that they can remember an actual storm warning, the marine version of a storm warning, being posted up for the Great Lakes. David Schwartz, the fat lady I think she is on stage. I can see her. The fat lady is on stage, and she's just about now to get her cue. to wrap it up. Okay, I agree. I just, we're running out. We've essentially run out of time here. It's the 24th of February. The week ahead is really all you have, and this week ahead is all you really have, and maybe after next weekend. Look, you look at that teleconnection forecast. It's hard to see how you're going to come out with anything different. Really. So yeah, could there be the odd event that pops up? Yeah, of course there could be. But I'll tell you right now, if we were to wind up with something significant in the first 15 days of March, watch um, watch those who have been predicting epic winters somehow make it as if one particular snow event, no matter what the size is, somehow makes up for the rest of the season, which, in terms of the forecasts that have been put out, have been a big, absolute epic fail. And I will just say this, and I know no one will remember this 6 months from now, but I'm hoping that someone does. This is why it is a complete and utter waste of time. Waste of time. All right. And all snow lovers are going to do it anyway because it's, as I said, the definition of insanity is being played out on a daily basis in throughout social media among I-95 snow lovers anyway. But what an absolute waste of time it is to read uh, and long range winter forecasts that pop up every year. Every year they are the same. An epic winter ahead. An epic winter ahead. No, you know what they should say? They should say, there's a winter ahead. It's going to mean that at times you're going to have winter weather. At times you are going to have breaks in that winter weather. And the overall outcome is, I have no idea. Okay. Uh, don't just try and remember it's just really an exercise in futility. You want to talk about things going on in a 2 week time frame, that's one thing. And you know what's really, I find the most annoying thing is that some of these people are they're still doubling and tripling down on their old predictions. Why? It's embarrassing. Just come out and say, hey, it's wrong. I was wrong. My methodology was wrong, and move on. Okay. But this sort of, and now of course there's the other thing, which is like, well, I was wrong, but it's because I made this mistake when I was figuring it all out. So you know what? If it hadn't been for that mistake, I probably would have been right. No, you wouldn't have been right. You're still wrong. Okay. So just stop it. It really, just stop it. And to the snow weenies out there, they're still grasping at every model run. Cut it out already. It's gotten to the point of absolute silliness, and just try and stay inside the 5 to 7 day time frame at the very least, and don't adventure much beyond it. You'll stay a lot healthier for it. You'll have fewer in the way of emotional ups and downs. Let's put it like that. Okay, it is Sunday morning, 10:33 Eastern time, and we're waiting for the winds to howl. Michael Piero, this storm isn't changing the pattern as it was supposed to. Well, it's no. The pattern is relaxing. Okay, temporarily, it is relaxing. The overall primary look of the upper air pattern really isn't changing very much. It's one of the hard things when you talk about pattern. You talk about quote pattern change. Okay, so you there's this sort of, I guess, this expectation that it's going to be a complete 180-degree flip from what it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just some subtle changes, and you've got this broad scale pattern that's been in place since pretty much for much of February, and now we're going into March. Well, every so often it's just like something pulses, and you get this pulse, pulses strongly, and then it just kind of relaxes. And I think that's really what this is. This upper low is creating an environment where you're getting the trough to kind of shift a little bit east, but it's not enough. Obviously, there's too much. The Pacific is too. There is too much going on in the Pacific that's wrong to create sort of this wholesale pattern change. People, folks have been focusing on other things too, like the Madden-Julian oscillation. Oh, it's in 8 phases, 8, 1, and 2, and that's cold and stormy in the east. Well, it's also cold and stormy in the Great Lakes. And when you talk about the east, you're talking about a pretty big area. So all of that stuff doesn't tell you where the actual mean trough positions are going to be, or where the mean ridge is going to be. You're getting this kind of temporary situation where the primary pattern of the dominating Pacific jet is relaxing. But you know what? If you look at the GFS and you look at the what the P&A we showed you earlier, the Pacific North America Index on the Teleconnections, it doesn't even bring it positive anymore. It basically says there's troughing in the west, and also remember the Pacific North America Index also takes into account the ridging in the east. So its view of all these different geographic areas, it works out that you're getting this negative reading right through the forecast period. It's no longer bringing up that P&A index up to positive. And even if it did, I don't think it would have necessarily led to anything. You could have all the teleconnections in the world. You know what has to happen? They have to teleconnect. Okay. In other words, the change that's going on in one place has to impact and create change in another place. And I think that's been the problem this winter, because you have sure, the Madden-Julian oscillation is in this favorable phase, but you know what? It's not teleconnecting to the El Nino. It's not teleconnecting to the Pacific jet and changing that around. It's not teleconnecting to the Atlantic jet. The Atlantic jet here, by the way, is as important as the Pacific jet, because of the lack of storms out in the Atlantic. There's no incentive for any of these storms to be forced up the East Coast. They can just go out their merry way out to the east. Nothing's working. Okay, there are times in the atmosphere where nothing is working, and I think that's what you're seeing here from a forecast angle. All the things that you expect to happen, that you expect to happen, aren't happening. It's important that when you're forecasting this stuff, that you recognize that early, because that'll save you a lot of grief. Otherwise, you're sitting around for weeks or even months waiting for something to happen, and it doesn't. And I think that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing this sort of constant grasping at straws, looking at every little sign that there might be a change. And the models have been fooling you all along from that standpoint, because it just ain't happening. Okay, it just is not happening. So, okay. Let's get a move on and have some fun on this Sunday, in spite of the fact that you might have some lousy weather where you are. So enjoy the rest of your day, and batten down the hatches, because those 50 to 60 mile an hour winds that are over the Great Lakes and northern areas of the Ohio Valley are going to howl throughout much of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states for tonight and for Monday into Monday night. So everybody stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.